of amendments to the Constitution that will constitute a Bill of Rights that we promised the people that we would amend, attached to the Constitution, that would become part of the basic law of this land. And several congressmen said, look, the congressman's out of order. Mr. Madison, bring that up next year, 2 or 3 years from now. We're trying to get the government organized and get off down the road to history here. James Madison, with some fire, said, gentlemen, next year at this time there won't be a United States of America unless we fulfill our promise and guarantee these freedoms for the American people. And he was right. There was a great deal of suspicion about this government, which powers were unchecked. And so they voted, let's have at it, boys. Let's get us these amendments going. And Mr. Madison was head of the committee that drew it up. And the First Amendment is the crown jewel in our crown of freedom. And Mr. Madison conceived of it as such. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition their government for the redress of grievances. James Madison explaining that to Congress. And if all the people in the United States would just read that, read his explanation, we wouldn't be in the shape we've been with some of the demagogic leadership we've had. James Madison said, these are the great rights of the American people in this one amendment. It's first, not only numerically, but it's first in importance. Without these basic rights, freedom of conscience, that is, a religion, to believe or not to believe as your conscience dictates, and not have the government meddling in it. See, up until that time, you understand, there had been state churches always. And if you didn't belong to a certain religion, you couldn't get elected to office. You couldn't hold office. In fact, you were considered a tacky citizen. And this was part of the show. Still is in some countries, including England. You can't hardly be Queen of England unless you belong to the Church of England. Honest to God, that sounds old-timey, but it's true. Well, I say that. I never have heard of anybody trying to be without being. But at any rate, Mr. Madison understood that if we were going to govern ourselves, there would be these basic rights, these basic freedoms that we had to have guaranteed, that the government, regardless of what kind of crisis was going on, regardless of whether Grenada almost had us cornered and were about to invade us and take us over, all 100,000 of them, we would observe these basic freedoms. Incidentally, that's one of the surest marks. A lot of people ask me, is McCarthyism still with us? Is that disease still on the land? Angels, anytime the mightiest nation on the face of the earth, 245 million strong, certainly the most affluent nation on the face of the earth, certainly militarily the most powerful, or one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful on the face of the earth, attacks the smallest, poorest island in the Caribbean Sea. 100,000 people. Blanks out the press in complete, the President of the United States shut out the press in complete violation of his oath of office. One of the oaths he takes is to uphold the Constitution and see that it's defended against all enemies, domestic and foreign. See the laws of the land are properly executed. He blanked out the press during that thing, those 3 days. And then gets up before the American people and said, this is our proudest moment. This to me is a travesty of the most shocking sort, the most unbelievable sort, a hangover from the McCarthy period of the most uncomfortable and despicable sort. And I jumped Abe Rosenthal, managing editor of the New York Times at the time, and I said, you have sounded off about the role of the press and asked me to make speeches on the brilliance of the founding fathers who realized that without a free press, a guaranteed absolute free press, mandated that the people couldn't govern themselves. As old Thomas Jefferson said, if you ask me whether I'd rather have a country of laws or a country of newspapers, give me a country of newspapers any day. That's how the people will maintain their freedom. That's the importance of free press to them. Absolute. No compromise at all. And I said, now you've admired this mightily. Are you going to print what's the New York Times doing, printing these handouts that the government gives? That's what they do in Russia. That's your criticism of totalitarian states. You hand out, you take government. I didn't want to press him too hard on it because the average Washington newspaper and correspondent were my loves and joys, and I don't want to say this tactfully because I admire mightily the journalistic profession, consider them absolutely crucial, in fact, the most important profession in our country. The average there wouldn't be 3 columns of newsprint in the average paper if it weren't for government handouts, and this is a sad, sad commentary, but it's true, angels. But I don't want to get off on the preaching end of this. I just want to stick to the point that I wanted to make to you. Combine fear with ignorance, and you've got the makings of McCarthyism. That's all McCarthyism was. And those who opposed McCarthy, many of them did, as I did. I got blacklisted. But hell, I was raised milking cows. I was raised on a farm down there in South Austin, Texas. And it didn't stunt my growth any that I know of, having to do that. I lost my fear of being unemployed. I was as vain as a turkey gobbler. I loved having people ask for my autograph and recognizing me at Toots Shores and at the various other restaurants for the big shots there, where I had a table always. The Mater D would always, Mr. Falk, your table's ready for you. And y'all ought to see it just had an absolutely electrifying effect on me, especially if I had kinfolks or neighbors of mine from Austin, Texas up there. I'd say, yes, we're right. I was as big a put on as there was. There's nothing, I can't deny that I wasn't terribly vain. But the point is something else. Once you understand that that's all they can take from you, getting a table at Sardis or at Toots Shores, or being recognized and your autograph asked for, and that you can run a filling station with your self-respect and your sense of worth intact, far better than you can crook the pregnant hinges of the knee where thrift might follow fawning with the likes of a wear. And you realize it don't take courage to do that. It simply takes a knowledge of who we are, what our history has been. Angels, if I remember this, I think it was Ben Franklin. It was attacked, I think, by one of his daughter-in-laws, or some kinfolk. An early day feminist, obviously, who said, "You all declare you hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator." And here, what hypocrites you are. You don't let women vote. You have indentured servants and chattel slavery. You buy and sell your fellow man here. What a hypocritical document that Constitution is. Why didn't you correct some of these injustices? Ben Franklin said, "You're right, those are injustices. And they're manifest, and you and I could stand here till this time tomorrow and repeat injustices and talk about injustices and not have to repeat ourselves. But you see, what we have done when we fashioned this Constitution was set a vehicle up on which the peoples of this land can travel down the road of history, correcting those injustices. That's what the Constitution is all about. That's what a self-governing society is all about. Correct the injustices. Don't expect it to burst out of Joe's forehead all corrected. And angels, if you stop and take the Constitution, the first 10 amendments, and all the subsequent amendments, you have the greatest monument, and I'm not saying this as a breast-beaten American patriot that's full of himself, but just as a simple statement of fact. What you have is the greatest monument to the struggle of a people to correct one injustice after another. Child labor, allowing, extending the suffrage to a greater and greater number than any people, any other nation on the face of the earth. We've set an example. We're the bellwether in that. That's who we really are. But we've got to know it before we realize we're having our leg pulled when we get to talking about, well, we ought to amend that First Amendment. It don't work right, you know, if it allows people to burn the flag. You know, they're just out burning flags everywhere today. Just, my God, you can't walk down the street and almost catching on fire. They don't burn the flag. And that's one of the major problems that confront Americans today. What are we going to do about burning flags? And so we're going to have to amend the First Amendment and make that again the law, burn flag. This is what you call political duplicity. This is hypocrisy. This is demagogy. This isn't talking about the problems of people sleeping in doorways. And you go to New York, those of you that haven't been to New York, you can go and see the pitiful sight of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Americans sleeping on doorways and grates and in subway stations. Homeless. That's a problem. What are we going to do about the vast expenditures of money that we're expending on the so-called defense industry now that we got an enemy that says, I ain't going to fight y'all no more. I done wasted too damn much money on this defense spending. How are we going to keep spending? That's what the defense contractors say. Well, you got to. You can't quit spending that money. You are not going to be discussing the real questions. That's what I mean. As long as you're discussing the superficialities. And you're the heirs, you're the beneficiaries of a very, very exciting society. What you pass on to those generations that come after you depends on you. And that's the very nature of this republic in which we live. It depends on you, the individual, to do what you're doing. Forgive me for running on so long. Now, if y'all got any questions to ask, we'll let fly with them. I'll be glad to answer any of them. Unless y'all... Yes, sir?
I was going to ask you, did you get...
Yes, you.
Yeah, did you get...
And then I'll catch you, sir.
Did you get the $2.5 million or the...
No, I didn't get it. Dad, blame it. I ought to say, yeah, I got it. I carried it around with me. And, no, what actually happened, it turned out they were a bunch of bluffs. They didn't have it. Now, they reputedly had millions and millions and millions of dollars, and this is why the biggest corporations in this country caved in before them and fired people at these people's direction and that sort of thing. They said, well, they're just too powerful. Turned out the only thing they had was fear. This is what they trafficked in. We got $175,000. That's all they had. One of the defendants had that much. And he was a pretty good old man. I felt sorry for him. He was a supermarket operator. And he really believed this. He believed anybody that voted for Franklin D. Roosevelt, as far as he was concerned, was a plotting, card-carrying communist, subversive, and trying to overthrow the United States of America. He honestly believed it. He didn't mind getting up and testifying, like drove his lawyer crazy for him to testify to that effect. But that's what he did. And he's the only one had any money, and so Nizer got it. The case cost about $500,000 to bring to court. So we really realized nothing from it except that unbelievably delightful feeling of that you had made some small and very small, and you had the privilege of making some small contribution to this society's understanding of itself. Yes, sir?
Yeah, you had mentioned how
I beg pardon?
So you had mentioned how the Soviet Union is no longer the threat they once were. Things are changing. What do you see the people who use fear for their advantage and the paranoia of it? going to try and find and justify what has been happening for the last 4 years?
That's a very good question, because they're obviously going to have to come up with something that's real scary. Sin or something that will unite us. I don't know, really. I'm not a world philosopher on that level. I just got back from Nicaragua, by the way. It's a little country for those of you that don't know. Now, I have an uncle that don't know. Cousin Ed Snodgrass don't know exactly where it is. It's down in Central America. It has 4 million people, approximately, not quite 4 million people in it. And as you know, we were told by a certain very wise man that they were just a few blocks from the southern border of Texas and could come in here at any time, that we were desperately threatened by these people. And so we had to send down there and, keep them lined up. We had to appropriate millions and millions and millions of your money out of your pockets, my loves, was sent down there to shoot these people, burn down their schools and their hospitals, and keep them in line, kill them old Sandinistas. Cousin Ed Snodgrass is an authority on that. He studied. He wasn't before, but he's an old Mama's third cousin, and he was over there and said, "Oh, Johnny, you old liberals is what's ruining America. You just make me sick. I believe you'd suck eggs." Is this something low down about you? You are ignorant. You don't even know where Nicaragua is. I didn't know where it was until I heard a speech by Mr. Reagan. Nicaragua ain't in Cuba. It's down there in Central America, right next to Texas. And Miss Kirkpatrick knows too, and she said, "I heard a speech of hers, Johnny," and she pointed out that them Sandinistas that you hear so much about, she made a study of them and found out that they ain't a thing in the world but Nicaraguans too. Now what does that teach us about them Sandinistas? My God, they've infiltrated their own country. That's what it teaches. And that's as subversive and low down as you can get. If it wasn't for President Reagan, we wouldn't know all that about those rascals. Well, I went down to see for myself how near right Cousin Ed was. I went to a symposium down there, and Daniel Ortega, the president of Nicaragua. And incidentally, all you have to do is land there. It's a beautiful land of volcanoes and hills and mountains and green, but so unbelievably poor. The people are so poor. You can see poverty everywhere you turn. They're gripped by this iron fist of economic despair down there. Thanks to our policies, we have just to give you a very brief history from my point of view of Nicaragua. When I was in the University of Texas, a former general of the Marine Corps, General Smedley Butler, some of you all might have heard of General Butler. He became a great turnaround. He served in the Marine Corps for a year, became a general, and then when he got out, he saw the error of his ways and went around speaking at colleges, and came to the University of Texas. And I remember this in the 1930s, and he was telling us about that we were going to reap a terrible harvest of the hate and misdirected policies that our government had engaged in down there, killing out any hope for self-government that these people had. And he was in a country called Nicaragua. That was just one. He'd also been in El Salvador and in Costa Rica and all. And that the fruit companies owned it. United Fruit Company owned almost all the land there and controlled the economy entirely. And that there was a man named Sandino that had caught the fancy of the people and was leading the people toward throwing off the yoke of American imperialism. And he was directed to kill him, to find him and kill him, and said, "We sure had a hell of a time, and he liked to kill us before we killed him." We finally got him. We finally got him shot. But said this is a wicked, wicked enterprise, and it's not what this country is all about. It's not what the United States of America is all about, and I want you students to know it, because we're going to reap a harvest of this, harvest of hatred for these misdirected policies. That was my job as the head of the Marines, was to go down and put down any kind of rebellion, any kind of insurrection in the people, democratic forces down there. And he established, and he told us that we've established a dictatorship down there, a man named Somoza. Well, that Somoza passed on to his reward, and his son took over, and he dictated a while, and then his grandson took over. Anastasia Somoza took over. And as you know, the people raised up against Mr. Somoza and literally vomited out Somoza and his detested and loathed and despised National Guard. The National Guard was his private police force, like Hitler's stormtroopers, kill anybody on sight, and they were spread terror wherever they were. Well, the people in Sandino's name, the Sandinistas, the Frente de Sandinista, what the hell ever they call it down there. But at any rate, they got a long Spanish name. They're bad about talking Spanish down there. They raised up and threw him out. Drove him into exile and drove out the loathed and despised National Guard. 1979. United States government recognizing that was an improvement, sent them some money and indicated if all went well, we'd learned a little bit from Chile by that time. And we had ended up setting up a dictatorship there, you see, Pinochet. So 1981 comes along, and His Eminence Ronald Reagan sends Bill Casey, head of the CIA, down there to destabilize a government that wasn't too stable anyhow. They were combating, years. For instance, Somoza had owned everything literally owned everything in Nicaragua. All the paving there that you see today is Somoza's pavement. He had owned the plants that produced the concrete and whatnot to do their paving and their building with. It was just a complete and total dictatorship, and the people remained poverty-ridden. Mr. Casey goes down there, goes around to Nicaragua, to Guatemala, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and hires, with your tax money, American money, hires these National Guardsmen. They wasn't doing nothing that day nohow. And all of them were ready to go. Brought them back in. Mr. Reagan had the kindness to describe them as freedom fighters. They came back in to freedom fight their own people by burning down their homes and spreading terror wherever there was a Sandinista stronghold. And we literally financed a war against the Nicaraguan people there that ran Angels, is running today, still going on today. When I was down there, they killed 8 people. And it's a shocking and unbelievable thing we did. The world court condemned us for our violation of international law, just naked and grim violation of international law. We paid no mind to it. Hell with it. And when I was down there at this symposium, and Mr. Ortega, who I understood to be a Marxist, you always see that, the leftist government or the Marxist government of Sandinistas, was up making speeches. A little fella, quiet little fella with horn-rimmed glasses on, and he announced that at this symposium, and there were a bunch of international scholars there from all the Latin American countries and a number from the United States. Not that I'm a scholar, I was down there with a bunch from Hollywood and New York that went down, called a celebrity plane we flew down on. People that are sympathetic to the Nicaraguan struggle. And he was making this speech and said, we invited Miss Kirkpatrick and Mr. what's that bird's name, that fellow in State Park? What? Yes, Elliot Abrams. You remember he was the one that was the real go-getter? Well, they invited him to address this symposium, and everybody laughed when Daniel Ortega said this. And he said, now wait, I didn't say that as a joke, and we didn't invite him as a joke. The name of this symposium is Democracy and Revolution. We've had to have a revolution in order to achieve democracy down here. We take our democracy very seriously. I invited them hoping that they would come, because they have as much right to express their opinions as I have to express my opinions. And you never know from whom you're going to learn if you listen to them. Said it just as quietly and just as convincingly. And then he went on to make a speech on what they were achieving. There's now, I think, 14 different political parties down there in Nicaragua. And that they're going to have an election in February. There's, I know, at least 5 different newspapers down there, because I saw them myself. And the strongest opposition paper, the La Prensa, is printed. They stop it every once in a while because they claim that it's run with CIA money, and the CIA has done them so dirt that they are not obligated to run CIA propaganda down there in their own country. But beyond that, and I don't believe in any censorship at all, by the way. I'm not sympathetic with censorship, whatever the justification, rationalization of it is. The point is that while I was down there, I could pick up a newspaper that said one thing on the newsstand and buy one right next to it that said just the opposite, that just raised unshirted mischief with the Sandinistas, and said what a failure and dismal failure it was, what a terrible org this man Daniel Ortega was. I was in Cuba several years ago. That is a Marxist state, and you jolly well don't find but one newspaper down there, and it's called Grandma. That's really the name of it. And they don't even pretend to have but one newspaper. There's only one legal political party down there in Cuba. It's a Marxist state, and when you call it a Marxist state, you designate it correctly. When you do that here in this country, you're playing to the powers that be. You're not being accurate. And one of the newspaper men I met down there, and this is just an example of it, several fellows were telling me in a bar there about a bus that had been blown up with 26 Nicaraguans on it last year sometime, on a bridge, on a landmine planted by the Contras. And this newspaper man, one of these several that's talking there, leaned across this New York Times guy and said, "You birds wouldn't even go out there. You didn't even bother to get out of Managua, to go out there to the scene to do any inspecting. You sent in that idiotic report to the New York Times that it could have been a Sandinista trick. That you had no right to say anything if you didn't even have a professional integrity to go out there and investigate it." Well, this kind of thing, you see, this is what we're subjected to. Newspaper men that never leave the hotel there, never leave the bar in the hotel, as a matter of fact, sending in reports. I was sitting down there on the 19th of July. That's their big day. That was the 10th anniversary of running Old Somoza out. And here was a lady on CNN, giving a report from their correspondent in Nicaragua, giving a report, said today they're going to celebrate their 10th anniversary of the defeat of Somoza's forces, of democracy, the defeat of democracy in Nicaragua. She's broadcasting this back to the United States, and I was sitting there watching it on television set in a hotel in Managua, not a mile from where she was doing her broadcast. And she said they expect several thousand people. It's reported that several thousand people will come into town for the celebration, into Managua for the celebration. However, it's widely believed and understood down here that the government's very unpopular and will lose very heavily in February. Now that was her report. Angels, when I got out at that big plaza where they had this thing, there were 500,000 people. And you have to sit up in top boxes where I was sitting and watch people flowing along the roads like great rivers flowing into a lake. It's just masses of people walking to this thing. To realize what a corrupt and prejudiced news report this was. It wasn't several thousand people came, there were several 100,000 people came there. You will see in February that unless we spend an awful lot of money and do something pretty desperate between now and then, and by the way, that's what we're doing, you know, we're down there, it's our business to go down and interfere in their election. You will see that the Sandinistas win by 95% of the vote, or something approaching that. Unbelievable support. I went to 2 or 3 celebrations of that kind out through the country, and these campesinos and all have a newfound dignity. They also have newfound land that they're now, their own land that they're working. And there is a spirit amongst them, although they're dirt poor, that's going to teach us a lesson, I hope, before we've gone too far down the road of destroying them. Well, listen, forgive me for keeping y'all here so late. You all know it's almost 9:30. I didn't mean to do it, really. I didn't mean to. I want to say this in all sincerity, and I really quite serious about it. I do an awful lot of speaking around the country, and I now have a cancer in the nasal pharynx, and I ain't supposed to be going out. And I get big chunks of money to go out and speak now. But my experiences here at Iowa State University have made it absolutely crucial for my state of health that I come anytime I'm invited. So y'all be careful. Don't invite me unless you want me back, unless I've gathered and gone to glory before then. I'll come back. This is one of my favorite schools in the United States. I say that quite sincerely. Thank you. Wait. Honey, I'm going to keep making announcements tonight. Children, I forgot to tell you, since I was here last, I fulfilled a lifetime ambition of doing a one-man show. I play 10 different characters in a town called Pear Orchard, Texas. And it has been so successful that PBS has bought it. And it was all ready to take to Broadway 2 years ago, and that's when they found this fool cancer in my nasal pharynx, and I had to drop out and start getting cured of cancer. And it's still there. They didn't get it cured, but I'm going to cure it. Prayer and determination will do it. But at any rate, but this show is now going to be, I've done it for PBS, and it's going to be on PBS sometime in January, and I urge y'all to watch it because it's a lot of fun. I'm the town mayor. I come out as a town mayor, Bill Grumble, just full of goodwill, you know, and so glad to see all y'all folks here, and just so happy to have y'all come down here in Pear Orchard. You know, them Japanese are coming next week, and I want to tell all of you, we got to be polite to them. They're going to buy a factory site here. They're looking for a factory site, and Pear Orchard needs some industry. It's part of our growth. And don't be calling them Japs, and don't be bringing up Pearl Harbor around that. Well, it's that kind of show, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope you all get a chance to watch it.